I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us in the world be as one. That's John Lennon. Okay, speaker number 2 is Matt Caddy, and evaluating him would be Joe Pulsovic. Joe, you want to go over the objectives and timing?
Sure, thank you. Tonight, Matt's going to be doing project number 2 in his Competent Communicator Manual, and his objectives are to select an appropriate outline which allows listeners to easily follow and understand his speech, to make his message clear with supporting material directly contributing to that message, to use appropriate transitions when moving from one idea to another, and to create a strong opening and conclusion. Matt's speech is 5 to 7 minutes. And the title of the speech is Mentor, Our Greatest Natural Resource.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, you have to go to the timing, please.
So your speech time is 5 to 7 minutes. Green light is 5 minutes, 6 minutes is yellow, and 7 minutes is red, and you have 30 seconds to complete.
Thank you, Joe. So let me introduce Matt. This is the title of Mentor. Is one of our rarest natural resources. This is the second speech from your Competent Communicator. Is that correct? Yes. Matt Caddy. Title Mentors. Matt Caddy.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, I began a CD program about a year ago in an effort to grow my business and my industry. And one of the things I noticed when listening to these CDs is that the instructor repeatedly says that he had 7 great mentors in his life. Now that got me thinking about how many mentors I've had in my life. And I've never been asked that question before, but probably the closest thing that I've gotten to it is, you know, when you're going to go and get married and you do the church, you have to do a weekend retreat so the priest will marry you. So we go on it, and one of the exercises are sit down with your significant other and come up with a list of other married couples that you would like to be like. And after going back and forth for about 5 minutes, we came up with a big long list of 2 people. And one of those people barely made the list, but we couldn't just have one. So that really got me thinking that there's not enough great mentors in this world. And a mentor is defined as a wise and trusted counselor or teacher, described as an advisor, master, or guide. It's advisor, master, or guide. So let me take a poll and ask you, who has had at least one great mentor in their life? Okay, how many have had 3 or more great mentors in their life? Okay, a couple of hands. How many have had 5 or more great mentors in their life? So we all know hundreds of people, right? And we struggle to think of a couple great mentors. I don't know if that's just me, but I think it should scare us. We've all heard the passage, give a man a fish, and you fed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you fed him for a lifetime. I guarantee you that most of us would rather write a check than donate our time. Essentially, feeding a fish for a day and not teaching him to fish. I'm sorry, feeding a man for a day, not teaching him to fish. On the other hand, have you ever realized how difficult it is to get advice from successful people? But on the other hand, how eager people are to give you advice that don't really have it together? I'm not interested in taking relationship advice in something that's dated 20 people in the last 3 years, or saving strategies from people that have no money, or healthy eating tips from people that are overweight. And I'm not saying that there aren't great lessons to be learned in failure, but what I'm saying is that I'd rather learn from somebody that's had sustained success in one part of their life for a long period of time. That to me is a true mentor. A lot of highly successful people have benefited from having great mentors, and it's made them better. Warren Buffett went to Columbia University, and one of his instructors was a man by the name of Benjamin Graham. Benjamin Graham was a renowned American economist and professional investor. He took Warren under his wing, taught him about investing and the understanding of how investment systems operate. Other great mentors have been Charles Mason to Thomas Jefferson. Gandhi mentored Martin Luther King. Gandhi also mentored Nelson Mandela. Martin Luther King went on to mentor Jesse Jackson. Socrates mentored Plato. Andrew Carnegie mentored Charles Schwab. And of course, Luke Skywalker was mentored by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it's not that there's not a lot of good information out there. When you consider how much great information is in books and how successful these people are, there are lifetimes worth of knowledge in books. So why is it that we can't read The Millionaire Next Door, and as soon as we close that book, have a clear path towards how we're going to invest and how we're going to accumulate wealth? The reason is we retain far more knowledge with human interaction. Sure, Warren Buffett is brilliant. He probably would have been successful no matter what. But Benjamin Graham took his learning curve, put it in overdrive, and bridged that gap between him being successful and him being one of the best business people in American history. Does the child of a pro baseball player have a greater chance of being a pro ball player themselves? Of course. When you read the Bible, do you get as much out of it as when you go to Bible study or when you go to a Sunday sermon? Of course not. But it does seem to me that our culture is changing and starting to value the mentor-mentoree relationship. Consider the growth in the consulting industry in the past couple of years, or the past few decades, and the momentum the last couple of years in the following fields. Personal trainers, business coaches, psychologists, and the recent growth of life coaches. We are beginning to understand the value of mentors. They hold us accountable and help us with consistency and the intangibles that are difficult to navigate by ourselves. If you're lucky enough to have a mentor in your life, cherish their knowledge and show appreciation. If you have things pretty well figured out, share with others. People who have mentors are more likely to be successful. It's not guaranteed, but they're more likely to be successful in all aspects of life. And if we believe that the generations that are younger than us have a lot to learn to take over the planet and make things better, what tactic do you think is more effective? Criticizing them or getting involved in their lives and teaching? Getting involved and becoming one of our rarest resources, mentors. Mr. Toastmaster?
Okay, take a minute and write down a little comment for Matt. Here's something I downloaded. I like this one. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Martin Luther King. Well, here's one from John Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Peace cannot be achieved through violence. It can only be attained through understanding. Ralph Waldo Emerson. It isn't enough to talk about peace. One must believe in it, and it isn't enough to believe in it. One must work at it. Eleanor Roosevelt. Nobody can bring peace but yourself. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Okay, speaker number 3 is Marshall Northcott, and his evaluator is Doug Ray. Doug, could you go over the objectives and timing? There you are, okay.
Marshall's speech is from the entertaining speaker of project number 2. Finding suitable material lies in learning to recognize it when you hear it or see it. His objectives are to draw entertaining material from sources other than his own personal experience and to adapt his material to suit his topic and show his own personality to the audience. 5 to 7 minutes.
Joe, timer.
Okay. Marshall, you know this pretty well already without being told, but just to refresh, green light is 5 minutes, 6 minutes is yellow, and red is 7, and you have 30 seconds to conclude.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, we're done with mapping school. Have you ever noticed that things aren't always as they appear to be? Tonight, Marshall will share some views on the subject of perspective. Marshall Northcott, it's all about perspective. It's all about perspective, Marshall Northcott.
Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. Ask you a question. If someone tells you the truth and you choose not to believe them, does it make it any less truthful? Get that? Someone tells you the truth and you choose not to believe them, does it make it any less truthful? Dr. Phil often talks about the subject of truth. And one of the things that he says is, it is not the truth that matters to most of us. It's our perception of the truth. Now, my goal this evening is not to get all philosophical about you and focus on the subject of truth. It's actually to talk more so about the subject of perception. Let me throw a question at you. If you were to think of Bill Gates, just think of Bill Gates for a minute, and then think, what is it that made Bill Gates so successful and so financially far ahead of most other human beings? If you had to answer that question, what would your answer be? Anybody? Yes?
He's at the right place at the right time.
Right place at the right time. Any other thoughts?
Fortitude.
Sorry?
He had the fortitude.
He had the fortitude. Okay. Anybody else have an answer? Yes.
I think he had the vision of where this was going.
He had the vision. Well, this is a subject that I have thought about for quite some time, and it's something that was discussed at great length at one point in my life amongst a group of people. And my perception of why Bill Gates has done so well for himself is a little bit different than most of the answers that I've just heard. There's a saying, a fool takes something simple and complicates it. And a genius takes something complicated and simplifies it. What Bill Gates did for us, what Bill Gates did for humanity, was he took something that was very complicated for most human beings to use. Does anybody in this room remember DOS? Right? Well, he created a system, he created software that was user-friendly. He created what we call a user-friendly interface. And that user-friendly interface is what makes it easy for us, even the people who would admit to be totally technologically inept, to turn on a computer and be able to use it. Anyone know what I'm referring to? Okay. So, a little different story for you. Picture this. Picture you're at a college football game. It's the last game of the year. It's a big deal, isn't it? The game has just ended. It ended on one of those grand finale plays where the visiting team scored a touchdown in the dying seconds of the game. Game's over, and as the crowd begins to clear away, the players begin to walk off the field. There is one player left standing in the end zone. Let's say his name's Rick. And Rick is standing there, bemused and bewildered, holding his football helmet in his hand. And as you look a little closer, you can see this look of anger and this look of upset. And this big hulk of a man even has tears streaming down his cheek. What is your perception? What do you think you see?
USC versus Stanford.
What would your thoughts be at that moment in time about that man's reaction to the game? What would your perception be?
He was disappointed.
He was disappointed. What would you think of his behavior?
Appropriate.
Sorry?
Appropriate.
Appropriate?
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else?
Crybaby.
Crybaby? And as you stand and you watch, The crowd clears from the stands. The players clear from the field. And eventually, the only two people left standing there are this player and the coach who has eventually approached him. What are you thinking now? Different thoughts go through your mind, don't they? And you might think, okay, come on, grow up, act your age. Hey, this is not your first loss, get over it. Right? Well, what if behind the scenes there was some things going on that you didn't know about? Could that potentially change your perception? This is a true story. This man, Rick, had played high school football, and he just so happened to belong to a school that had a team that had a history of winning. They had swept their entire season when he played high school football. And at the end of high school, he was recruited into college football. And he and a few of his fellow players went to play for the same college. And they actually ended up with a college that didn't have a winning streak. But what had happened was, these young men and some of the other young men who came to join this team had a different attitude about winning. And they had grown up with this attitude of expecting to win because they triumphed in every game all season long. And so it was no surprise to them that when they got to the end of the season, they had won every game except the last one. And as Rick stood there crying and the coach said, "Come on, Rick, it's time to get off the field," he said, "No, coach, we were supposed to win that game. I'm not leaving the field. The game's not over. We just ran out of time." And it's all about perception. And the important thing for you and I, quite often in life, is to be willing to challenge our own perception and open our eyes up and take a different look at the world, because we might come to different conclusions. Mr. Toastman.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you can take 1 minute to share your comment with Marshall. To have peace and friendship with all mankind is our wisest policy, and I wish we may be permitted to pursue it. Thomas Jefferson.